Snow fell hard against the windows of a lonely cabin when an old woman heard faint cries at her door. Opening it, she found two dogs, freezing, trembling, on the brink of death. She pulled them inside, wrapped them in blankets, and saved their lives. But what she thought was a simple act of kindness turned into something far more shocking. At sunrise, her cabin wasn't met with gratitude. It was surrounded by police cars, red and blue lights flashing through the snow. What secret did these dogs carry that brought the authorities to her doorstep? The answer stunned everyone. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled through the pines, carrying with it a bitter cold that seemed to seep into every corner of the mountain village. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, blanketing rooftops and silencing the world beneath its weight. Inside her small log cabin, an old woman named Eleanor sat beside a fading fire, her frail hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Winters were always hard, but this one felt particularly cruel. The storm had come without warning, and even she, accustomed to loneliness, felt a strange heaviness in the air. Just as she was about to retreat to her bedroom, a faint sound pierced the night. It wasn't the wind or the cracking branches outside. It was softer, desperate. Eleanor opened her door, and the cold struck her like a knife. There, huddled against her doorstep, were two dogs. Their bodies trembled violently, fur coated in ice, eyes pleading for warmth. Her heart clenched. She knew what it meant to be left out in the cold. Without hesitation, she reached for them. "Come in, little ones," she whispered, as the storm raged behind her. She had no idea that saving them would change her life forever. The old cabin filled with the soft crackle of fire as Eleanor laid thick blankets near the hearth. The two shivering dogs crept closer, their paws hesitant against the wooden floor, as though unsure if this sudden kindness was real. Their bodies were thin, ribs faintly visible under their damp fur, and their eyes, wide, alert, and filled with fear, watched her every move. Eleanor knelt slowly, offering a bowl of warm milk and scraps of bread she had left from supper. At first, the dogs sniffed cautiously, but hunger soon overcame hesitation. They devoured every bite, tails wagging faintly as life returned to their bodies. Eleanor smiled warmly, her wrinkled face softening. "You poor souls," she murmured, reaching out a trembling hand. To her surprise, neither flinched. Instead, one lowered his head onto her palm, and the other curled against her leg as though they had always belonged there. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt something stir inside her chest, a sense of companionship she thought she had lost forever that night. As the storm battered the windows, Eleanor sat with the dogs beside the fire. She whispered stories of her late husband and children while they listened in silence. Their presence filling the cabin with warmth she hadn't felt in decades. The BY morning. The storm had passed, leaving a blanket of snow over the forest. Sunlight streamed through frosted windows as Eleanor stirred awake, expecting to find the dogs still curled by the fire. Instead, they were standing at the door, ears pricked and bodies tense, as though listening to something far beyond her cabin walls. Their sudden alertness puzzled her. When she opened the door, both bolted outside, circling the yard, sniffing the snow, and barking at shadows that didn't exist. It was clear they weren't ordinary strays. Eleanor wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped out to calm them. "What is it, my dears?" she asked softly, but the dogs ignored her, their eyes fixed on the tree line. One pawed at the snow near her doorstep, uncovering a patch of disturbed earth, while the other stood guard, growling low as if warning something unseen to stay away. Eleanor's heart pounded. Why would abandoned dogs act like trained sentinels? When they returned inside, their behavior grew even stranger. They paced the room, ears flicking at the slightest sound, then positioned themselves on either side of Eleanor as if protecting her. She felt a chill run through her, not from the cold, but from the realization that these dogs hadn't stumbled upon her cabin by accident. They were here with a purpose. That night, Eleanor lay awake, the dogs restless by her bed. For the first time, she wondered if saving them had drawn something much bigger into her quiet life. The following morning, Eleanor was preparing her tea when a sharp knock rattled the wooden door. She froze. Visitors were rare in this remote part of the forest, especially so early. The dogs immediately bristled, their hackles rising, low growls vibrating in their throats. Eleanor's hand trembled as she set her teacup down and reached for the door handle. On the other side stood two uniformed police officers, their expressions stern and cautious. Behind them, more figures in dark jackets fanned out across her snowy yard. The sight made Eleanor's chest tighten. "Good morning, ma'am," one officer said firmly. "We need to ask you about something unusual reported in this area." The dogs pressed against Eleanor's legs, refusing to back down. Confused and anxious, Eleanor invited them inside. The officer's eyes immediately darted toward the German shepherds. They exchanged a quick glance, one muttering under his breath, "It's them." Eleanor's stomach sank. Them? What did they mean? She tried to ask, but the officers sidestepped her questions. Instead, they demanded to know where the dogs had come from and whether she realized how dangerous they might be. To Eleanor's heart raced. She thought of the previous night, their strange behavior, their vigilant watch at her door, and the way they seemed trained for something more. The officers weren't here to thank her for saving them. No, their arrival carried suspicion, even feared. As Eleanor stood frozen in her cabin, surrounded by police and guarded by the two dogs she had taken in. She realized her quiet life was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. The room felt heavy with silence as the officers' questions grew sharper. "Where did you find them? Did anyone come to your door last night? Did you notice anything unusual?" Eleanor, still bewildered, explained how the dogs had been freezing outside her cabin, and she couldn't leave them to die in the storm. Her voice cracked as she added, "They're just lost souls, aren't they?" One officer sighed deeply before pulling out a photograph from his coat. It showed the very same dogs, standing proudly beside a group of uniformed handlers. "These aren't strays," he said gravely. "They're K9S, police service dogs. They went missing during an operation 2 nights ago." Eleanor's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. The other officer explained further. The dogs had been part of a rescue mission, tracking dangerous smugglers through the snowy forest. In the chaos of the storm, they had become separated from their unit. The police had been searching frantically ever since, fearing the worst. Eleanor looked down at the two shepherds lying protectively at her feet. They weren't ordinary visitors seeking warmth. They were heroes who had braved the storm and somehow found their way to her. The truth left her shaken. She hadn't just saved them. In a way, they had chosen her. Eleanor sat quietly as the officers prepared to take the dogs back. Her heart ached at the thought of losing them after just one night. Yet she understood now why they had seemed so different. They weren't just survivors. They were trained protectors, still loyal to their mission even when abandoned by circumstance. But before the officers could lead them away, something unexpected happened. Both dogs refused to move. They pressed themselves against Eleanor's legs, tails thumping softly, as if declaring she was their home now. The officers exchanged a look, surprised by their defiance. After a pause, one of them smiled gently. "It seems they've made their choice." What began as an act of kindness in a snowstorm became the start of a new chapter. The department agreed the dogs could retire early, living out their days in warmth and love with the woman who had saved them. Eleanor, once alone in her cabin, now found her days filled with companionship, laughter, and purpose. The village whispered about the old woman who sheltered 2 lost K9S, and the morning police surrounded her house. But Eleanor knew the truth. She hadn't rescued them. They had rescued her too.